Hi, this is Jason from Horrific Nightmares, and it's time for a positive spin. Now, today we're going to be talking about the Suspiria remake. Now, my history with this film is a wild one. Now, I originally bought this when I was with Joe the Horror Man at Newberry Comics. I went up there to visit a family friend who was not doing too well, and while they were out doing other things, I went and saw Joe the Horror Man and Dave Maggot, or Dave McDonough. And he took me to a mall which had like a toy store, which was really cool, a FYE, and Newberry Comics. And I saw this there, and I had it in my hand. I kind of put it down. I had it in my hand, and I put it down, and I finally ended up buying it. Well, when I got back from my trip, I actually fell and broke my hip because I'm old, and I ended up in the hospital. Actually, on our way back from where we were, we had turned in the rental car, and yeah, it was pretty much a disaster. And I asked my wife to bring in some movies so I could watch them when I was in the hospital. One of them just happened to be Suspiria. Now, I was on a ton of medication, um, painkillers, because I had literally broken the ball of my hip off, just in half. And they gave me very strong pain medication because I was healing. They had to put rods in there and screws and all that kind of stuff, but you don't want to hear about that. So I would watch movies and I would find myself dozing off, of course, because of the pain medication. But one of the movies I started watching was Suspiria. And I don't know exactly what I saw, but I didn't really think a whole lot of it. It's a 2.5 hour movie, and I probably saw maybe 15, 20 minutes of it within, with dozing off and seeing weird stuff, you know. So then I decided to give it another shot, and I was completely blown away. So I told Joe the Horror Man, I was like, dude, I said, you got to watch this. Because he had had a copy of it too and just never watched it. We have this thing about run times and stuff like that. You guys know that. So he decided to watch it, and I watched it again the next day with him, and it blew me away even more. So let's put a positive spin on Suspiria. I know a lot of people are going to say right off the bat, why does this need a positive spin? I didn't know this needed a positive spin. This does have a 6.7, which is very high for horror on IMDb. But I find this one to be very divisive among horror fans. Now, there are people who love the original and refuse to accept the remake. And in a way, I understand. I was kind of the same way, even though I'm not really quite sure what I saw when I was in the hospital. But all I kept hearing about when the movie came out was negative reviews on it. How bad it was, how it never should have been touched, how Suspiria was this classic that this was just a cash grab or a piece of junk or garbage, trash fire, whatever you want to call it. And yet it has a 6.7. What does that tell you? that maybe the whiners cry the loudest. And that's a shame. That's one of the reasons why we do positive spin, to try to offset the nastiness and the negativity. I don't really have a lot on this movie because I love this movie. I actually think it's a masterpiece. But there's a few things that I did want to say about the film. One of the things that strikes me on this movie is that every scene means something. Every scene is deliberate. And I like movies like that. This movie has a lack of color, of course, up until the end, which we all know what happens, but well, people who have seen it know what happens, but the original is noted for being beautifully colored, yet this one lacks color, and I think that is a good contrast for a remake. Of course, this is a very divisive remake, which I already said. It definitely does its own thing while keeping the shell of the original. Another thing I wanted to say is that this is kind of an interesting point for me, is that this actually feels like a school. You have the dance hardwood floors, you have the mirrors and stuff like that, where in the original just felt like a big building to me. Even the dorms were kind of lavishly decorated, where not so much in the remake. It looked like a school where people go to dance. The city is dark and depressing, and I think that that works well because it sets up the mood of the piece and it kind of keeps the viewers on their toes. Those are basically the things I wanted to say about the film, the biggest positives for me, because it's definitely a contrast to the original, which I really like. I mean, you're basically telling more or less the same story, but in a different way, a very different way from the original. Now, about this, the point I was making about how the negative people cry the loudest. This was supposed to be a trilogy, but because of the initial reaction of a lot of the people and a lot of the reviews, this one got stopped dead in its tracks. And that's a shame because I would have loved to have seen where this could have gone. Like I said, I think this movie is a masterpiece. I think it's a beautifully made film. There are some things that I didn't think were necessary in the film, but I understand why they did it. But I just think it's a great movie. And check it out. Or don't. But don't forget to check out Joe's positive spin for Suspiria, the remake. And remember, guys, physical media matters. And until next time.